Hi world! So today at Leveraging Your Influence is day 4 and it's around taking leadership in action, and the first thing we looked at today was privilege. And privilege is having the access to resources that other people don't have. It's having more access or more advantages in the world. And we started talking specifically about racial privilege and around the dynamic of having people of color and white people working together in the same room. And one of the first things we talked about is one of the most common patterns that occurs in these situations when we're talking about race is that a person of color will speak up about an issue and a white person will get defensive or hurt or upset, and the attention will go to the white person and it'll stay there. So that was the first thing that was named, and I've seen this a number of times, and it happened in our group, and it's a really common pattern that happens with systemic racism. And so Mickey started talking about how when people become defensive, they need to be seen for their own humanity. So we're not trying to make people wrong here. We're trying to hold everyone in our care. And everything, and knowing that everything that anyone does is an attempt to meet needs, however tragic that attempt or the impact of that attempt is. Mickey shared that one of her hopes is for people to be willing to be uncomfortable, especially in issues of race. White people especially get, I'm naming this as a white person, get really uncomfortable talking about race. It's like there's a lot of shame built into the race relations and the history of race relations in our culture, and it's not pleasant or easy. And something that she's sharing here is this desire for people to be willing to be in the discomfort. She shared that historically whiteness is the erasure of cultural experience, that whiteness is an identity of oppression, that white people may have a connection to culture, but whiteness as a blanket statement is something that erases culture. And that she also shared that there isn't anything logical about the issue of race. It doesn't make sense because it is a system of control. So I'm going to touch back on race in a moment, because what we did later, or what we did next during the day, was talking about dialogue. The primary happening during that session was talking about the issues of race within our group, and I don't feel comfortable sharing exactly what happened because they were personal experiences. But that is what happened, just so you know, that it wasn't like a drop in the pot. It was a full, 3 hours, 4 hours that we started off with this morning. So this afternoon we moved into dialogue, and one of the things that was shared was that when dialogue fails, the escalation is nonviolent resistance. When negotiation fails, the escalation is war. So the difference between dialogue and negotiation. The purpose of nonviolent resistance is to force people into productive dialogue. The purpose of war is to get what you want. And then she talked about protective use of force within the view of NVC and what that is. She says there's 4 qualities of protective use of force, or 4 criteria, or reasons when it would be appropriate or called for. Number 1 was that it's a choice to use force that is non-reactive. It's when your intent is to protect something dear on the most physical plane from harm, and that the conditions are so urgent that dialogue is not possible or dialogue has failed. And that once you create a protection, you resume dialogue. And the purpose of protective use of force is to create an outcome attentive to everyone's needs. And she shared this quote from MLK, which is, "The language of beloved community is a language that includes the oppressors." Language of beloved community is the language that includes the oppressors. So here we're talking about how we don't want to exclude anyone from the human family. As much as someone's actions may have hurt us or hurt another, we want to include everyone in the human family, otherwise we're not actually making progress. She shares more about dialogue in that dialogue is a conversation whose outcome is unknown. However much I want something, for it to be true dialogue, I need to submit to the unknown outcome. And the NVC, or nonviolence, requires the consideration of everyone's needs involved. When making powerful requests in dialogue, we want the request to be focused on finding a solution for all. And that's related to the currency of mattering. When we're having a dialogue, it's important for for me to know that I matter to you, and it's important for you to know that you matter to me, and that every interaction includes, do I matter to you? And when we include that in our dialogue, we have a far more likely chance of finding solutions more quickly that work for everyone. And Mickey shares, this is one of my favorite quotes of hers, to share the deepest truth possible with the most care possible. So the steps for dialogue, just reiterating a little bit, are to speak the deepest truth, which is much with the most care possible, and to end with a question or request. And then so that's sort of ending the piece on dialogue, and it's really important to shift from dialogue to negotiation, because dialogue is really holding everyone's needs and aiming to find a solution that attends to everyone's needs. And even if we don't find a solution that attends to everyone's needs, mourning together. And so it's really about togetherness. So when we come back to privilege, Mickey shared that we started out in collaborative societies in collaboration with nature, sort of human history. What happened was a loss of trust that nature will provide for us, and it turned us into forcing nature to produce. From that came division among people, because once you start, storing things, storing produce, some have more and some have less. So it's a really simple sort of beginning of time separation from egalitarian society to where we are now, and it is a far jump, but it's sort of like it's the beginning of the divide. She also shares that privilege can only exist in authority-based societies, and the question posed is, what are the shifts necessary to have fruitful work on transforming privilege? And this is so crucial to me. I feel so heartbroken about the state of the world and our systems of oppression that are in place, and just the fucked upness of it all. And part of the heartbreak is that as a person with privilege, I don't feel like I can do enough. Like, I should be able to make significant change in this totally fucked up system, and even when I do my best, it feels like it doesn't make tangible change, or it doesn't make enough tangible change, and I am dissatisfied with that. So that's my personal contribution to that. She shares, when someone takes an action that has a negative consequence, the person who has been impacted by the negative consequence will have their attention on the consequence, and if I'm the person who's taking the action, I'll have my attention on the intention. What I need to do as a person who's taken an action with a painful consequence is shift my attention to the consequence. So it's like, if I've hurt you, and intentionally, you're focusing on being hurt, I'm focusing on I didn't mean to, and what I need to do in order to move forward is focus on I hurt you, and mourn that my need for contribution to your life wasn't met by that action, or whatever needs weren't met by that action. So that's all the notes we took today, and it was mainly because we had a lot of dialogue, we had a lot of role play, and we had a lot of real life situations, especially around race. Yeah, it's a really big thing. I just want to affirm that racism is a real issue, and that if we're not acknowledging it, we're contributing to it. One of my favorite quotes is that those who do not stand up in situations of injustice have chosen the side of the oppressor. I believe it was Desmond Tutu who made that quote, but do check it because I'm not 100% sure. But those who say nothing in situations of injustice have chosen the side of the oppressor. That doesn't mean to make the oppressor wrong. That doesn't mean to exclude them from the human family. But it is that we need to stand up, and that it's gonna take all of us, if not most of us, in order to make real change. And I want to be able to look in my children's eyes, however many years down the road, and tell them about the state of the world and discrimination and oppression. And when they ask me what I've done to change it, I want to have something to say. That's what's really haunting me today, is that I will not live my life having nothing to say to my children about what I did to make a difference. And I am looking for a shared reality around that. So if this is something that's important for you, I'd love to hear from you. If you have strategies around making a tangible difference around oppression and systemic privilege, I would love to hear from you. And that's all I'm going to say tonight. I really hope you have a beautiful evening. I know it's not really night there. And yeah, I love you. Good night.